Hi, welcome back. This is week 8, video number 2. And in this video, we're going to talk about PowerPoint and slide design. When people give presentations, a lot of people use PowerPoint. And PowerPoint has become almost as recognizable as anything else. It seems like whenever people give a presentation, they use PowerPoint or Prezi or some type of presentation type software. And PowerPoint is one of those things that you either love or you hate. PowerPoint is something that, again, we are so accustomed to seeing that sometimes we kind of tune out of it. In this presentation, I want to talk about PowerPoint and about how to make PowerPoint work for you, because I think it is a really good tool. It really does help with presentations, especially when we're talking about remote presentations like the kind that we're doing during this COVID time, because it gives people something to focus on screen rather than simply just looking at somebody's face talking. But it's important that we use PowerPoint correctly, because there's nothing worse than a deadly boring PowerPoint presentation. And in this video, I'm hoping to give you some hints and some tricks, some things to think about for when you're using PowerPoint. And I will mention that when you're doing your group presentation that's going to be coming up in the next couple of weeks, I am going to be asking you to use PowerPoint or some type of presentation software. If you prefer Prezi, you can use Prezi, but some type of presentation software to reinforce your presentation. So let's talk about the pros. What's good about PowerPoint? The first thing is that it's great for visual learners. So people have different learning styles. Some people learn by listening. They like the lecture format and they like hearing people talk. Some people learn better by viewing. Okay, so they like that visual element. Most of us are sort of a blend of the two. Okay, so PowerPoint works because it's something to look at while you're listening to somebody speak and explain stuff to you. It's also great from a selfish perspective because it can operate like notes from which to speak. So if you're looking at your screen, you can look at those bullet points and it helps keep you on topic so that you don't go off on all sorts of tangents. It keeps you organized. It also helps to reinforce your your verbal message. So it's like a visual of what it is that you're saying. Okay, what it is that you're explaining. So it's great in terms of the brain. Okay, it really helps people get the message that you're sending, right? And be able to encode it into their own brain. So it's good for an audience as well. Okay. What are the negatives though of PowerPoint? And these are the ones that you probably know, very well. The first is that it is really, really overused. We end up in something that we call PowerPoint exhaustion. When we're, especially in a situation like we're doing, when we're doing online learning, if we see PowerPoint over and over and over again, our brain gets tired. It doesn't like the lack of novelty and we get exhausted, okay, from PowerPoint. So that's the first con. The second con is that a lot of times people put way too much information on a screen so that it actually ends up pulling people's attention away from the speaker, because people are trying to read all of this text that they're seeing in front of them on a screen. Excuse me. We're going to talk about some ways to make sure that we don't put too much information up there. But people who are bad with PowerPoint will oftentimes jam tons of information on a single screen. Not good. Another problem is that PowerPoint is not accessible for the visually impaired. So when you're dealing with a group of people, you will have some people that have visual impairments in that group and that may have difficulty seeing or may not be able to see at all what it is that you have on the screen. You got to keep that in mind so that, you're not relying on your audience to read stuff that you're not actually going through verbally. And then finally, the deadliest part of PowerPoint is that people end up just simply reading off the screen. So they pull up a slide and they read every single word that's on the slide. That kills an oral presentation. There's nothing worse. And you probably all have had the experience where you sat through that, where somebody opens up a PowerPoint presentation and just simply stands in front of you and reads. So, how do we make sure that the PowerPoint that we're going to design is one that actually engages people? It really comes down to slide design. So, I'm going to give you a handout in the week 8 folder that goes into this in a little more detail, but I wanted to go over some key points with you to keep in mind when you're designing slides, whether it's for our oral presentation or for oral presentations that you'll be doing in the future. The first rule is simplicity. You want to keep your slides as simple and uncluttered as possible. It's nice to have different colors. It's nice to have different graphics, but if it makes the presentation look messy or look overly complicated, you're going to lose people. Excuse me, they're going to end up focusing on your slide and not knowing what to look at. So keep it simple, okay? The font is also really important. When you're presenting in person and using a data projector, you want to use at least a 24-point font. If you're on screen doing it over Zoom or doing it over Blackboard or something like that, you want to use at least 20 points. That's simply to help people with the reading. If your font is too small, people are going to have to squint and have difficulty seeing what it is that you have on your slide. You want to make it easy for them. So even though 24 and 20 seems really big in terms of a font, it's ideal for a presentation. Maybe the most important key point to keep in mind is this thing that they call the rule of eights. The rule of eights is that, excuse me, really coughing today, very dry. Okay, sorry. The rule of eights is that you include no more than 8 words per line on a bullet point and no more than 8 lines per slide. Studies have shown that our brains start shutting down if we have more than that. Okay, so again, with the simplicity, keep it short, keep it simple, don't overwhelm people with information. You also want to make sure that your bullet points are in keywords and that you're using what they call telegraphic speech, which is not full sentences. Okay, so just points and keywords. Visuals are nice. Okay, use graphics if they're necessary. So maybe you want to show a chart, maybe you have a pie chart or something, some type of visual that will help people understand. But don't put visuals in just to have them. Okay, don't go clip art crazy. Make sure that any visuals that you have are meaningful and really help support your message. Okay, otherwise you end up with stuff that pulls attention away. There's some other things that you can think about that are in the handout that I'm going to put on slide design in our week 8 folder. But I think if you even just work for our presentation on these key things, the simplicity, the font, the rule of eights, the use of keywords, and the judicious use of visuals, you will end up with a really nice PowerPoint presentation. The other thing I wanted to show you, and I'll give you this link in Blackboard, is something that actually comes from the APA. And I love this particular presentation that the APA has put together because they have put together some information about the worst PowerPoint ever. And it gives you a demonstration of what not to do when you're actually creating and using PowerPoint slides. And this is right from the horse's mouth. This is from the APA, right? Our big body that covers how to do bibliography and everything else. I'm going to get you to look at this presentation, okay? And it's kind of funny because what they do is they give examples of things that are bad in terms of PowerPoint use. And then following that, they give you some hints and tips about how to overcome it. So let's just even take a look at this one here. Okay, here's somebody that did a, presentation on Chilean exports. Okay, and then, right, take a look at the last point. If you've read this far, your eyes probably hurt and you've been reading this tedious, long-winded text instead of listening to me. Look at me, okay? So making the point that too much information and not using the rule of eights really pulls attention away. Okay, imagine if somebody put this slide up about Chilean exports, you would stop listening and start reading, start panicking. Oh my gosh, so much information on the screen. I got to read it all. Okay, so here it says, right, too much text, right? Font is too small. So don't put large blocks of text in your presentation. Emphasize the main points. Okay, use a large font. Other examples, okay, they talk about bad color choices, right, that make it difficult for people to see, and, right, that is a colorblind combination that makes it inaccessible to people with color blindness. Look through it, okay, it's kind of fun to see how horribly wrong PowerPoint can go when you're not thinking about all the important key points. It's a fun little presentation to look at, but it really helps reinforce the importance of slide design. Okay, in our next video, we're going to talk about outlining for presentations. So I'll talk to you in our next video.